even when I'm Representative Kathleen Cates. I just want to kind of tell you how we're going to do this. We're going to introduce the senator, and she's going to speak about 20 minutes on things that she wants to bring to your attention that happened this legislative session. And then I'll speak for about 20 minutes. Then we'll take questions from the audience, and then we'll give some opportunity for questions out on Zoom. And so wanted to just thank everybody for coming here. I hope you signed in so we can stay in touch. There's water and seltzer in the back. For those of you who don't know, I always bring water in cans. I try to avoid plastic bottles. So that's what makes it look weird, but it is water. It's just regular water. And so thank you so much. It's just so you know, these are your representatives from the Corrales area. Back in 2023, the redistricting occurred, and so you have one representative for the whole village of Corrales and one senator for the whole village. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware that these are your, and I am very pleased that the senator is here, as this is kind of your hometown in a way. You know, you grew up here, and so a hometown girl, and her freshman year, and so I look forward to hearing about it. So thank you very much. Take it away, Senator.
Thank you, Representative. Is it on? You all can hear me? Yes. Okay, wonderful. These are sharper than the legislative ones. So thank you all for being here. Buenos dias. I'm Cindy Nava. I see a lot of familiar faces. I am the very proud Senate District 9 Senator, first term in office, first time candidate, all of the things. Those of you who know me, I ran on truly just uplifting and bringing the notion and the importance of representation to the table as an immigrant, as the daughter of current undocumented immigrants, mixed status family. I will tell you, the path to get here was not easy. Never was, but I could not be prouder to represent Senate District 9 for many, many reasons. Not only growing up working in a lot of the areas that I cover now, especially with my grandmother doing a lot of work in Corrales and my mother cleaning a whole lot of houses in Corrales. I grew up spending a lot of time here. So now being in the roundhouse representing, it's very ironic to say the least, but it brings, I think, a lens that is critically important. As a former DACA recipient and the first in the country to serve in a Senate seat, I'm very proud to bring those voices to the table as well. And really, on the campaign trail, we spoke about healthcare, education, housing, and all of the issues that were affected by, especially in Corrales, things like water, agriculture. And I was very proud to really accomplish perhaps more than the things that I thought I would be able to do in my first term. And I went in saying that I was not going to sponsor an immense amount of legislation because I wanted to be intentional about where I put my focus. And I know that we had a very limited amount of time. But I ended up introducing and co-sponsoring quite a bit of items that were really meaningful. So 17 items as a main sponsor. Then we had a House co-sponsored piece of legislation that I joined Representative Cates with, and then several other pieces of legislation. As you all know, this legislative session, even though it was a long one, it really ran by fast. 247 pieces of legislation made it to the finish line, 195 bills were passed, and 160 were signed into law. And we came in also with the largest budget in state history, which was really exciting for everyone, 10.8 billion. So I think at a time like now, as you all know where we stand nationally, it is critically important that we are strong in New Mexico, that we have a backbone that is resilient, and that we join hands and join forces, not only bicamerally, but really through a bipartisan lens as much as we actually can. And I took that to heart. And I will tell you that I am deeply, deeply grateful for having had the opportunity to get some of my initial pieces of legislation across the finish line to the governor's desk. But one that really was sort of that came out of no one that brought it up to me. This was something that I knew that was when we talk about public safety and access, and when we talk about crime and the rising crime across the state. We know that there's a lack of police presence. We know that we need more recruitment, more retainment of police officers across the country. And I knew that specifically speaking of New Mexico. So that was one of the pieces of legislation that I was very proud to sponsor. It was Senate Bill 364. And that bill, essentially what it did was open up access to become a police officer to folks who are not non-citizens, because right now the requirement is citizenship. And my bill essentially opened up the opportunity for legal permanent residents and DACA recipients. So everyone needs to be legally in the United States. This is a piece of legislation that was not new, that was precedent of already. Colorado, California, and Illinois had implemented it. And that's how I knew of it. And I knew of it because my brother and I were always very engaged in, sort of very interested in law and the criminal sort of aspect of helping communities. And we spoke about this 5 years ago with a police officer in Albuquerque. And he said, well, DACA recipients and legal permanent residents can't even apply to be a police officer, not even a public service aide. And that's an issue, especially when we talk about rural New Mexico, problems with recruitment, and really expanding our chances of folks who can serve. So I spoke to leadership, brought the idea. I thought maybe perhaps we would get it past the House, maybe past past the Senate, past the House, but we got it across all the way through. But this was a movement that started, I mean, it was really grassroots level. I had the help of Speaker Martinez as a co-sponsor. And then on the Senate side, Senator Cervantes, Senator Padilla, and Senator Craig Brandt. Republican near my district, who joined forces. And let me tell you, I'm very proud of it. I am very proud of having presented along Senator Craig Brandt in every single committee. It made a difference. It showed a much bigger spectrum of what we were trying to do, and we got it through, and the governor signed it on April 7th. And I am incredibly proud because I know that's a bill that will have direct and immediate impact in terms of access, in terms of getting police force on the ground, including opening up opportunities to recruit in rural New Mexico. And in speaking to mayors like Mayor Torres in town of Bernalillo, they have a terrible time with recruitment and sort of the turnover. So this bill really addresses, I think, a situation that's a severe need in the state, and we got it across. We did not think that we were going to be able to do it this first round, but we did, because I think the sense of urgency. This is a public safety bill. It's a workforce development bill, and it was just common sense. So I'm very proud, and we got that through, and that will come into effect in June. So starting in June, folks will be able to apply who are non-citizens but have legal permanent residency or DACA status, so that you all know. And I will make sure that we have information that is shareable for folks to make sure to amplify. Along with that, there are certainly pieces of legislation from the healthcare aspect. We had several compact bills and unfortunately didn't make it through. I was not a main sponsor of them, but I think politics perhaps got in the way of several of them. But I think those are really great bills. I worked closely to Senator Linda Trujillo, who is the main sponsor, and I am really looking forward to supporting her in the next session once she presents them once again, because I think they were critical bills. Another bill that I want to uplift is the turquoise alert system. I was one of the main co-sponsors there with Senator Angel Charlie, Representative Abeda, and Representative Charlotte Little. And this is to address Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is a really big win for our Native American communities, and I was very, very honored and proud to be part of that. That was passed. Also, the medical provider patient IPRA, that was to protect our medical providers who are doing anything from providing abortions to gender affirming care, ensuring that they are protected. We really had we also, I was part of the housing stabilization bill, which would have started the Office of Housing. I know it's been introduced before this year. Unfortunately, didn't make it through, but I'm really deeply passionate about that one because I know what the offices of housing at state levels do, and I know how it can help address everything from unhoused communities to the lack of stock and really the investments that need to be made in constructing new homes across the state. So those are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight. I was also very proud to, of course, be strategic about the appropriation of my funding. And I told folks I'm going to be very diligent about ensuring that where those funds go, because I want to make sure that they're going to the district throughout the district and to projects that are, where some of my colleagues are coming together to support at-large projects, but specifically related to Corrales, and also working diligently with other representatives, such as Representative Cates, to ensure that we're not overlapping on certain items, but really addressing the needs of our communities. So I was very proud to provide Corrales Elementary $100,000. We also provided some funding for Corrales fire suppression and construction, Corrales police equipment, and Corrales rescue ambulance purchases. And all of the, thank you. Well, I wish we had more money so that we could invest more, but I do think that the collaborative effort makes a difference, a world of a difference. And I think coming to the table and being able to talk things through in terms of, how are we going to split the funds? Even the Senate gets more, of course, than the House, right? So how do we bucket those things in strategically to address the needs of our communities at large? Also, being really candid about the fact that the needs of our communities are different, right? Across my entire district, which is very large, the needs are just really vary. But public safety was very loud and clear, and that was one of the things that we were really happy and really strategically focusing at large across chambers during the legislative session. So I think those are some of the sort of at-large things that I wanted to make sure that I share with you. I will pass it over to you, Representative, and then if we want to add anything else, I'm happy to jump in as well, because I have a whole lot of additional bills that we can speak to, but I would like to engage in more of a conversation with folks to ensure that we address the questions that they may have.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator. So I'll just pick up, I'll kind of work around this as well, pick up where the senator left off. So just so you know, how capital outlay works is we have a set budget to be able to distribute. And if we overfund something, they don't get the extra money and we don't give it back to redistribute it. So working very closely together is very important to make sure that we maximize every dollar and make sure that the district is covered. And the senator and I work very well on making sure that Corrales, as I said, there's only the two of us. So this is my priority to make sure that you're covered because there is no uh, discrepancy there if we're not communicating. And so, as the senator talked about, that we try to fully fund all the fire requests and the police requests and Corrales, and we were able to do that. Just so you know, a couple of other projects that I funded was SCAFCA, which is the flood control in Sandoval County. They had a project that is up in Rio Rancho, but it affects Corrales, because you know how the water shoots south of Rio Rancho and dumps into there. So that's a project. And then the senator and I, on Alameda, the light on Loretta, the one that we never have to stop at usually, hopefully. Um, so they're going to actually make a turn north on there, because right now your people who are dropping their boats or riding their horses, they're getting in a very precarious, not very well off ramp right at the very western end of the bridge, and it's dangerous. So they're going to make the turn lane at that light. And that's under MRGCD is paying for that. And so the senator, I made sure that that was fully funded as well. Thank you too. I learned, this is only my second term, my third session, and but I've learned to get my work done and get it done early. So I pre-filed 17 bills. I carried 39 bills. 9 of them were signed by the governor. So that's kind of a quick layout. I always like to talk about water here in Crowley on this great day of water. It's raining. I love to see that. I talked a little bit at the village council meeting about SB 21, I believe it was. Um, it is just to catch those who were not. Sorry for those who were there at the village council meeting. Um, Back during the Richardson administration, so groundwater is very, very important to New Mexico. Probably more important to our state than any other state is our groundwater. And we gave up the regulation of that during the Richardson administration to the EPA, saying that it would be federally regulated. So the who regulates it is the EPA out of Dallas. Doesn't know a lot about our state. This has been an ongoing issue. One of the things that your administrator, Ron Curry, told me back in 2022, my first campaign, saying, I want this resolved. This is something that keeps him up at night. Um, so then there was some federal court cases and then Supreme Court uh, uh, Supreme Court, what am I trying to say? Supreme Court opinion that came down last year saying that the federal government will no longer regulate waterways that are not consistent. So waterways that go dry and then wet, dry then wet, the federal government will no longer regulate that. So people can pollute in those streamways. Well, that's New Mexico. So if you're in Ohio, probably doesn't affect you very much. But in New Mexico, we still have the Rio Grande River is still protected, but all the tributaries going into them were no longer being protected from pollutants and people that dump it. So this became even more of an urgency. So we were able to get this passed, which brings the regulatory oversight of this type of water back into the state of New Mexico. And we already had set up structures that oversee it, like the Water Quality Control Commission and others. And so this is a very big win for water for us. I will say I also carry water appropriations bill, water protection fund appropriations. These are NMFA, New Mexico Finance Authorities, investments into water projects. It could be drinking water, it could be acequias and watersheds around the state. It could be uh, septic and drinking water at our cultural affairs areas as well. Uh, I just completed a 3-day workshop in Silver City this past week, which I do once a year. It's in a different part of the state every year, which what we do is for 3 days, we have all the state agencies there and to do nothing but talk about water. It's the Water Leaders Workshop. They have different types of them throughout the year. I try to go to 2 or 3 of them a year, but the big one, the 3-day one, I just completed and got to take a tour of a geothermal power plant and a copper mine. I've learned a lot about geothermal over the years, but I've never seen an actual power plant. And so that was very interesting. The governor has signed 11, what I count 11, maybe if you're more conservative, 10, because one is really not a water, but it affects water. So I'm going to call it 11 bills. She signed 11 bills this legislative session that affect the quality and the availability of water. For those of you who don't know, the New Mexico Tech came out with a 50-year water plan in January of 2024. This plan has been referred to as the governor's water plan, Interstream Commission's water plan, New Mexico Tech's water plan. Everybody gets to claim the water plan, but it's a 50-year water plan that was comprised, put together by some of the top scientists and water experts in the country through New Mexico Tech. It is a very comprehensive study that is saying that in 50 years, New Mexico could have up to 25% less water than we have right now. Ohio will have 25% more water. That's how they're seeing what the climate is. So even the climate deniers who say, oh, every drop of water on the planet is still, we don't lose any drops of water, but they move, right? So we could have 25% less water in 50 years. So that is becomes an urgency for me when I'm looking for bills and investments on how we can address that. And part of it is monetizing water, requiring that, not monetizing it for us, but monetizing for industrial users. Identifying water that is not appropriate, that is not a potable water for us to ingest or grow our crops on, but maybe it's such as, so Intel, I love to hear about mistakes that turn out to be really beneficial. Here's a mistake. Intel lost their water rights. So for those of us who remember Intel when they first came here in the 80s and all the big thing, and they had to buy water and buy wells through the city of Rio Rancho. They went to renew them, and whoops, the city of Rio Rancho did not get all their ducks in a row for that. So they had to scramble quickly, and they went out to the city of Albuquerque, who had just identified brackish water on the west side with a pipeline. So they had been cooling their chips with brackish water now for the last several months. And actually, the chips like it. And it is no longer our potable water. So these opportunities are what we want to look for to see, such as oil and gas. Why are they using potable water for fracking? I mean, we can have a whole conversation about fracking. The Senator McKenna's here, but let's just talk about why they're doing it. Why are they using potable water? Let's make them use other types of water so that we can stretch and maintain our water for our agriculture and ourselves as well. And so that is a big opportunity that I'm constantly looking for. And like I said, and I've had many different investments. I also PFAS, for those of you, I know that the counselor asked for information at the last village council meeting about the PFAS bill. I do have handouts for them if you want to know more about it. Those of you don't know, every day, every year, this is a terrifying thing. The cabinet secretary would go to these cabinet meetings with this little tiny $10 vial of liquid that we put on our clothes and our couches. Because if you have messy kids like me, it helps keep the stains off. And it costs $1 million to clean up when it hits our ground, when it hits our groundwater. And we're about groundwater here. So what it is PFAS are these little micro pieces of plastic that are in our water, and we consume about a credit card's worth of plastic every year. That is a little bit terrifying. It is especially big in like fire retardant, the big foam for the large fires. There are certain dry cleaning fluid. There's certain products that have a higher PFAS. For those of you who read the newspaper, you know that there was a large contamination through Cannon Air Force Base that caused them to slaughter hundreds of cattle because there's no cleaning it up. They had to slaughter the cattle for no use and no consumption. So we want to be ahead of the game here in New Mexico, once again, because our groundwater is so important, our ground is so important. And so we have one of the first big PFAS Protection Act bills in the country. And so we were able to get that signed by the governor as well. So in my district, District 44, I always say approximately, understand that all statistics and data, kind of They're not an exact science. But statistically, in my district, I have almost a third, and a third between Democrats, Republicans, and declined estates. So my independent declined estates, all my constituents are important. But I really always am looking for opportunity to give more voice for those who have not identified with a major party. Major party gives a lot of great infrastructure to make sure that you're informed and that you have that voice. But if you have chosen not to pick a major party, I want to still make sure that you have a voice with your electeds and with your policies and procedures. We were able to get SB 12 passed this year by 3 votes in the House. And thank you, Senator. She got it through the Senate side. And so this allows that if you are a declined state or independent voter, here in New Mexico, independent is not a party. It's just a state of mind. And so we call them declined estates here. In other states, independent might be a party. But if you are in a declined estate or independent and you want to vote in a primary, you will be allowed to now go to the polling place and ask for either a Democrat or Republican ballot. Vote half and half. You have to pick one or the other. But the bill we passed in 2023 allowed you to do voter registration on the day of election. So if you were declined to state and you wanted to participate in primaries, you could identify as a major party to participate in that primary. The thing is what I heard when I talked to constituents is declined states are not individuals who are indecisive. They have decided to be declined to state. That is a decision, and some have found it offensive that they must choose a party, even if it's only for 24 hours, to be able to participate in the election process. So that is why we really worked hard as a big group of senators and representatives and bipartisan to make sure that we could get this passed to protect our declined estates. This is especially important to me. You know, New Mexico is founded by independents. That's why we came here. That's why we
Wow.
from the East Coast or from Europe or wherever we
Yeah,
came,
yeah.
Mexico or wherever we came. We came because in this state you can be independent, and I want to make sure that we can protect that voice there. And I continue to look for opportunities to be able to increase that independent voice as well at the election level. So that was signed by the governor as well. So part of the reason why some, I think, might say, whew, this session was especially hard is Senator Duhigg. I just did a town hall with her, and she said it very eloquently. She was like, it's always a 60-day session, but this was like two 30-day standalone sessions, because when we had a special session last July, because the governor was concerned about crime, I'm not part of leadership, so I didn't make those decisions on how it was going to be addressed. But I had read the bills that she had proposed, and they were not, and the main one would not have held up in court. It was going to give officers the right to hold people as long as 9 months without charges, forcing medication until they had a behavioral change to be able to participate in their own defense and then charge them. We did not believe that that was going to be held up in court, but we do hear that there is definitely a crime problem. It's based on a lot of different things that are happening right now, but one is our behavioral health program throughout the state was devastated in 2013-14 when the then governor closed down the 13 largest behavioral health uh, organizations throughout the state. And then the company she hired from uh, Arizona didn't have their pharmaceutical license for a year. So we had individuals, I'm going to make this up, in like Artesia with schizophrenia with no medical support system, and for a year, but usually a lot longer. So organizations, we in the interim, sit on the Health and Human Services Interim Committee and the Standing Committee. We have organizations that are up and running now 10 years later, and they're still only at 40% of what they were at before these clinics were closed. This is because when individuals have been stabilized and they've been have a big strong support system, and then all of a sudden they have no support system or medication, it takes a long time to identify them. They are no longer seeking, they don't have the support, they're out and about. Where do they go? They go where there's assets, which is the metro area. So then they come here. And that is a lot of what the crime or our individuals with disabilities that are on the street are about right now. And we're trying to address it. So it was heard that there's definitely an issue, and the House worked on a crime package, while the Senate worked on a very strong behavioral health package. These were key, and this became the priority of the first 30 days. We wanted to make sure that these bills were signed, were ready, passed, and signed well before the end of session. We do not have to wait to do. They were signed in February by the governor. So I want to tell you a little bit about the crime package, and maybe the senator could talk to you a little bit about the behavioral health package. The crime package has 6 bills in them. One is a competency bill that will hold up in court. Representative Chandler and Anaya put that bill together, working with our state Supreme Court justices who made sure that it would hold up in court. We have a crime package that increased penalties for fentanyl if you have possession of 100 fentanyl pills or more. There were increased penalties on carjacking and car theft was another one. Another one was if you are pulled over under suspicion of influence, and currently, if the officer asks you, will you take a breathalyzer? And you say yes, and you take a breathalyzer and you do not, you pass it because maybe you're under an influence other than alcohol. So this gives them the right to be able to draw blood and to be able to test for that. For everything but cannabis, I asked them to amend cannabis out because cannabis can be in your blood and you won't be under the influence. It's just there for like 30 days. So that bill was put in the crime package. And then the bill that I carried was the gun conversion bill. So for the federal, we've had a federal law for decades that says a plastic device that is usually put into a Glock, a handgun takes it from a semi-automatic to an automatic, is illegal. It is especially attractive to juveniles because it could be made on 3D printers like my earrings right now, which is a much better thing to make on a 3D printer. And it turns the semi-automatic to us. The juveniles in our state are very attracted to these gun switches, these Glock switches, conversion devices, and they are a federal crime. The problem is there's so many of them and there's so many other things. Our federal authorities are overwhelmed and often are not charging them on this charge. Maybe they have other charges. Maybe they're overwhelmed with other cases, and there's a 15-year-old with a duffel bag full of gun switches, and they are choosing because they're overwhelmed not to charge. So our law enforcement have come to me and our DA's offices, the different DA's offices, both Republican and Democrat, have come to me and said, we need a state law so that when the federal authorities decide they can't charge, we have the right to charge because we want to be able to charge. We'll find the ability to do that. And so that is also in the crime package in which I was able to present and get that through. And so I'm very proud of the work that we were done. It is not enough. I still have another gun bill that should have passed it. It didn't, but I'm going to bring it back. I think the governor will put it on her call list. And I hope to do that. I want to talk one more. So sorry, Senator. I want to talk one more, but quickly about another incident. Has nothing to do with me, but it's a great opportunity to show you how your legislature works and how much your voice really matters. So we passed a couple years ago a red flag bill. It says if an individual is stressed or having a mental or behavioral issue, that with the say of a mental health counselor or a family member, law enforcement was allowed to notify them that they would come and pick up their firearms in 48 hours, and then they can hold those firearms for a certain amount of time until they get an actual hearing to make sure that we're not doing self harm and other. Well, when I was campaigning, I always go and visit with all of my law enforcement uh, through Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, and Corrales. And I heard consistently, and they were not talking to each other, but they were telling me, I always ask them, what do you want me to know that you don't think I know about? And they all said things different, but they all brought up this story that this red flag law, they were, they're law enforcement. Their job is to, enforce the law. They don't mind enforcing it. It's just that a couple things. One is they feel they are perfectly qualified to identify individuals that would be of harm in themselves and need to have their weapons removed for a short period of time while they stabilize. That law enforcement has that training and they don't want to have to go find a counselor or a family member that might be fearful of making that identification. And the other thing is, police chiefs don't want to send officers and say, hey, we're going to come back in 48 hours and take your guns. Now you have 48 hours to fortify before I send the guy back again. This is endangering our law enforcement, and this is a concern. The reason why I like this story is this was a very difficult law to pass. A lesser legislator would say, oh, I'm not opening that can of worms. Sorry, you guys have to make it work. But Representative Chandler and Representative Garrett said, no, we have to listen to our law enforcement has told us. And they went back and they redid that red flag law and they represented it and they had to open up that can of worms. They had to go through all the same fights with it, but they went through it to make sure that the law enforcement had the tools that they're asking for. And so I just think that that is, as well as our independent voters, is a way to show that your voice really counts. Just please speak to your representatives. And I will pause for a moment too to go back to the senator and see what she forgot.
There you go. Well, I think what I will add is on the behavioral health and healthcare sort of pieces of legislation that we had. As Representative noted, it was sort of a trio of behavioral health bills that we were working on. So Senate Bill 1, 2, and 3. I was very proud to be a co-sponsor of them as well. So essentially, Senate Bill 1 establishes a trust fund for behavioral health initiatives across the state, ensuring sustainable financial support for mental health and substance abuse treatment. Then we had Senate Bill 2, and that was consisting of an $140 million appropriation to fund expanding behavioral health services throughout New Mexico on a regional basis. And then Senate Bill 3 was essentially sort of the cornerstone of the Senate of the comprehensive healthcare package. Because this one creates a behavioral health executive committee that oversees the development of regional behavioral health resources to identify service gaps, tailoring solutions to meet local needs. So all of those sort of came together cohesively with the crime package. And we are hopeful that they will begin to address the many needs that we have. We know it's not an absolute fix. It's very real, but we know that I think it's a very good starting point. And I think what made it stronger was that collaborative effort, because that was what was needed. But I think it's a starting point to a whole lot of work that we have ahead of us, especially now with the uncertainties of federal funds.
Thank you so much. So I just, I'll just let's talk a little bit about that, Senator, and then we can go to questions. Is that is on the forefront of all of our minds? What and we don't have an answer. What's going to happen this afternoon? It's not even Monday, and it could happen this afternoon. What's going to happen, and how will it threaten? I will tell you, and I don't have a clear answer. I will just let you know that every bill that we carry, we have that in the forefront of our mind. New Mexico, one of the things that we have more in our savings than any other state per capita. We have an extraordinary amount of savings. So one of the issues that I believe that we've had for decades before this governor came in was we have a constitution amendment that says we can only spend what we earn. There's no deficit with our state. But the problem is 25 years ago, everything we earned was oil, gas, or timber. So when it was high, we had a lot of money and let's invest in education. Oh, now it's low. Now let's cut education. High, low, high, low. And we were not building any momentum. And that is why we're like, why do people talk about us as if we're a poor state? We have money and it goes back and forth. And we also save an enormous amount of money. So in the last 7 years, 6 years, we've been building trusts so that as doing a couple of things, we're been diversifying our work for our revenue streams by increasing the film industry, cannabis industry, and other industries to bring in money to the state to diversify it. So instead of being 80 to 100% of our revenue, oil, gas, and timber, it's like 45 to 50% right now. We still need to diversify more, but it's coming that way. The other is to have trust funds and where things are being funded by the interest off the trust so that as oil and gas goes back and forth, we have a lot of alternative energy. That's also a big thing for our solar and wind. As that becomes volatile, we have some stabilization in education, Medicaid expansion, social services, housing, things like that, water. So that is how our government is moving to structure for that stabilization. If the federal administration decides to cut all money from anything, let's say Medicaid, we will be hurting. We will not be able to survive that. We absolutely will not. I don't want to give any falsehoods that we would. I will say that we have a larger savings than most, and we have a bigger Medicaid expansion, and we are putting policies in place that have standalone Medicaid programs so that we can mitigate some of that hit, maybe last a few months instead of a few weeks. It is not it's not even a Band-Aid. It's a little piece of gauze. But understand that it's more than most states have because we have such a large, even today with building all these trusts and making all this money right now and spending all this money on behavioral health, we save approximately 30 to 33% of all our revenue we put in a trust or the general fund or some kind of permanent fund savings. So that is substantial. I don't know about you, but I have never been able to save 33% of my paycheck ever. And so, that has brought some stabilization. It will not survive what is being threatened, but it will mitigate, we're hoping, until we come up with the next move. I don't have any clear, good, strong answers. Just know that it weighs heavily on all your representatives and senators because we know that that is what we're trying to structure is things that can help absorb that by making them more standalone in our state. And thank you, Senator. Do you have anything?
I actually would want to hear from you because at the end of the day, we are serving you. I am here to listen to you and to see what your concerns are, and also to really uplift, everything from, of course, the federal concerns to the state concerns. There's not a ton that we can do to fix immediate federal situations right now, but I will tell you, it is difficult to see it happens on by the minute, right? And as someone who came from the past administration, it stings. And I hold it deep and dear to witness and to unfortunately see programs that I worked on personally with colleagues across the country being dismantled by the second. But I think that should give us 10 times more passion to remind us of the importance of the urgency of the moment and to remind us that even though it hurts for us, there are people who are much more disadvantaged than all of us here. And where are they sitting? Because they don't have a voice in these spaces most of the time, and they don't have the ability to sit in these rooms to uplift their concerns. So I think it weighs heavier now more than ever, but I think having the ability to have these conversations, having the ability to unify, to ensure that we really sort of hold tight at a time like this to support one another is more critical than ever before. So I would, if we are going to open it up, Representative, I'm more than happy to move over into that section.
Thank you. For those on Zoom, we're going to do first people in the room. And so go ahead, raise your hand and go ahead, Renee.
Okay, I'm gonna hold the microphone for you, so I'll get you started over here. I'm gonna hold it for you.
Hi, my name is Paul Stokes. I'm a Corrales resident. And my top issue is the climate crisis. So that's what I'd like to address today. I will have an ask in a little while, but I think I need to give you some background on where I'm coming from. You in fact addressed some of the things, Representative Cates, that is a part of my concern, and also part of the solution to my concern. It turns out that in order to fund the severance tax permanent fund, the savings accounts you talked about, it was necessary to make an estimate of how much income would be derived from the oil and gas business and from the severance taxes in order to write legislation on how to counteract that. I won't talk about that legislation, but there was a bill written in 2023 on that. But the point is, when I looked at the projection, the official projection of how much income we're getting from the severance from the oil and gas industry for the severance tax, it turns out that their estimate said, this was made in 2023. They estimated that by 2030, we will have doubled our oil production. Now, I was shocked about that because that has to do with the climate crisis. That's a crisis to be producing all that. If all the other states and over the world, for that matter, were to do that same thing, we'd all be toast by 2050. So what can be done there? By the way, it would double by about 2030, that is the production, and then it would gradually decline until 2050, back to about how much we're producing now. I guess, to sum up, we've done pretty well in the state on addressing consumption of energy. The ETA and the RPS have done a good job on that. It appears to me that's not true in terms of production. We produce a whole lot of energy. In 2024, the estimate was $71 billion in New Mexico from oil and gas. And that contributes to the climate crisis. So I guess I'm finally coming to my question. What do you think the state and the legislature can do to deal with that? It seems to me that it just doesn't seem moral to me that we're producing that much oil and gas and that much heating of the environment, so that by 2050, we're not quite sure whether civilization will be able to survive or not. Can the legislature address consumption as well as they have or I'm sorry, can they address production of energy as well as they have the consumption, which was done through the ETA and the RPS? So that's my question. What can the legislature and the state do?
Um, Thank you, Paul. And I'm going to give you a little fraction of an answer that is not worthy of that very big question. But I will say we were able to pass increased leasing fees this year, which is something our land commission has been trying to do for years and years. Just for those of you know, we have a Permian Basin, in the southeastern part of our state. The bigger part of the basin is actually in Texas, but the better quality and the deeper oil is in the New Mexico part. So that is the part they want to drill. And I am not aware of any legislation that is being presented or has a chance of being passed to stop the production. I'm not. But I will say things like we were leasing drilling opportunities below what Texas was, and we have the better oil. And so the commissioner asked to have it raised, and they kept voting it down. So she just held those leases. She wouldn't let him go because you get locked in for a life of the lease. She held on to them, and it finally passed this year, the increase of them. I think penalties on these small oil producers that are not capping their wells correctly are one of the issues. I think that we have some technology coming by. A lot of our methane is cattle produced, and that is a big thing here in New Mexico as well. And so these are things I know, and I do know that the land commissioner a new land commissioner will be elected in the next year or two. And so that is something that I would most certainly hold that feet to the fire. But I do know that Representative McQueen, who is the chair of Natural Resources and Energy and sits behind me, and I go and ask him all these questions as well when bills are being produced. That is something that is weighs very heavily on him. I don't have an answer of how we can reduce it. What we can do is hold them accountable on how clean it is. Are they using fresh water? Are they capping their wells correctly? Are they paying for what they need to pay for? Because it's private land. I can't. So it becomes a much more complex issue. And so sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead.
hands. I'm going to hold the mic for you. You're going to hold, okay.
Thank you very much for coming and for giving us all the information about the hard work you've done at the legislature. I have a couple of things that I wanted to address. Apparently, I didn't know about your presentation to the village council, which I think probably addressed the agricultural issues. To address the agricultural issues that we have as farmers. The Land Conservancy is not recognized by the state according to state statutes. They only recognize federal land conservancies, which puts those of us who've put significant land into a conservancy easement in a very difficult position in terms of our tax liability. And then the other is that it was again reinforced with USDA that Sandoval County is not one of the counties they're recognizing with drought. And as a farmer in Corrales on the west side of the ditch, we're not getting enough water to grow our alfalfa anymore. And I have a grant in with NRCS to replant, and I don't have enough water for seed. So I'm, between a rock and a hard place. Even though a significant amount is in farmland conservation, I will be taxed if I can't show receipts for production of crops. I will be taxed as if that land is developable, as if I could build buildings on it, which I can't. So what is the plan going forward for helping to look at those issues again and become successful to protect those of us who are trying to continue to farm there?
So thank you. I didn't talk about this at the village council meeting because it wasn't really as a legislator, but to know that this is something I do talk about every single week. I know you're a member of the farmers co-op, right? Which I highly encourage all of our irrigators to make sure that you're a member, that they have really done a great job organizing and creating a voice that has to be listened to. I carried a bill that Councilor Miera helped developed that would address some of those issues regarding the taxing part of it. It was killed. I amended it 3 times and it still died. A lot of the answer was like, well, that's that problem in Sandoval. It's not for the rest of the state. Which I don't like that answer.
State statute. The state statute.
So we will continue to work on it. I've got a bigger stakeholders of attorneys this time because I understand the constituent concern is I need to make sure that it will hold up legally. And so I do plan to bring it forward again.
I'd like to work on that.
When we have it set from a legal standpoint, then I'll bring it out to stakeholders.
My parish that's been supporting asylum seekers, and there's some very alarming things happening. And we recently had an interview with Bloomberg News, and we were sharing information with her. She's an investigative journalist, but she also shared with us that there are 2 vendors here in New Mexico. One just got a $400 million contract to transport people out of our state. And the other was to provide housing to the children left behind. And I know of families in our parish where the kids were in school and the parents were picked up by ICE. What is New Mexico doing to help protect our community from this terrible onslaught?
I will default by taking that one because it is really sort of the most terrible of stages that we could see ourselves in because of everything that is happening just consistently nationally. And I can't fully go in depth in terms of the exact things that we did, but I will tell you during legislative session, we had this conversation nonstop, and it was bi-caucus, right, bicameral. So I can't speak to the House, but I will tell you, ultimately, we ended up coming together. And this was a together between House, Senate, and Governor to address specifically immigration from a lens of New Mexico, from a lens of our immigrant communities, and what we could actually tangibly do, because there's a lot of things that we cannot do. And as an immigrant, believe me, this isn't just something that I research or that I hear about. I live it every single day. And I hear and I have family members. So it hits in a whole other manner. So it's difficult and it's hard. But when I met with my colleagues, specifically the Senate, in our caucus, lots of folks wanted to sort of raise in arms and bring down, the bureaucracy to defend our communities, which, believe me, I know is needed. I had to sort of recenter folks and remind them that even though that's what we want to do, sometimes by being loud, we take folks under the ground that would have never been taken, because those folks can't be loud because the fear is very real. And from my own lived experience, it's extremely real. And the fear just takes part of you. I mean, and it's a consistent thing that you have to live through because remember, these folks have to provide for their family. So they're still trying to work, right? And then we have folks who are being questioned and being targeted and being just, there is no consistency really in who is being deported either. So we are not the federal government, of course. But in New Mexico, we made it a really, really top priority that we invest in an appropriation to ensure that we have legal services for folks who are going to need them. So we did it. And I was very, very proud, very grateful. The governor, I've known her since I was a student advocate. So we had a very close communication sort of process throughout the entire session. Anything that she was hearing, anything that I was hearing, because at this point, it's about the entire legislative body communicating with our communities, right, and our districts to see what's happening from southern New Mexico to northern New Mexico to even some of our folks, which I'm sure some of you heard during session, some of our Native American brothers and sisters who are being targeted, right? I mean, and it is just unacceptable. But something that is critically dangerous is misinformation. And that I will tell you over and over again. And I tell it to my family, I tell it to the community members who worry about this. And misinformation is dangerous. Social media is extremely dangerous. And I think it's very important that we know where we are contributing. And thank you for your work with our community and with refugee communities, because now more than ever, of course, we need the support. We are lucky that we are in the state of New Mexico. We are lucky that we have folks who are ready to stand their ground, but they know that we have to be strategic. We can't just bring down the government to stand before folks to sort of defend them, because we have to do it strategically. And we are here with a really strong backbone, and we understand the communities that are being targeted. So information, sharing it with our communities, I think is extremely vital now. So we want to make sure that we do that. If there are immigrant communities that you work with or that you're connected with, and that we can come in and talk to. I am specifically volunteering myself because it's deep and dear to my heart. It's part of my life. It's who I am. But at times like now, it is critical. And I'm very proud that we have a governor who's invested, and we have a legislative body who understands the urgency. So I can assure you, as the most immigrant person in that legislature, and I tell Javier, I'm more than you, because you are undocumented, and he agrees. So I will tell you, I was so very proud to serve in that body. And we are all aware that this is not the end, and we're going to have to be consistent about the support systems that we distribute out on the ground and with communities. But you are our best allies, because as our constituents, the information, the resources that we can sort of pull down, then we can share with you to share out to the collective communities who may not have the ability to sit in forums like this. So thank you. Yeah. Next question.
Thank you, Senator and Representative, for doing your due diligence and being so on top of things during that long 60-day session. I am really upset, and I'm wondering if either one of you or anybody in this room knows why the governor pocket vetoed HB 284, which is the free roaming horse bill. You had tremendous support on the House chamber. It was unanimous on the Senate chamber, and she pocket vetoed it. So once again, we get to worry about human and horse safety on New Mexico roadways. I was with the Congresswoman a few days ago when she was doing her town halls in Rio Doso. There were 4 free roaming horses on one side of the highway and 2 others there. Speed limit there, 55 miles an hour. And now, once again, because she's pocket vetoed it, we get to worry about accidents, injury, and death. So if you could share with us what you know, if anything. I'm going to continue to investigate too, because Representative McQueen, who I co-sponsored with in 2023, he doesn't know either. And then one more thing I want to share with the audience here. League of Women Voters on April 10 had a PFAS presentation. It's on their website. Please go and look at it. It's about an hour's long. lwvcnm.org. It's already on their website. Thank you.
I can just say to Senator, I too am disappointed, and I'm especially disappointed that she chose to make it a pocketed veto, which means we don't have a message or guidance. And no, the governor doesn't tell me why she does things.
I will also just jump into this because I also do not know why she pocket vetoed it. But this was actually a bill, I will have to tell you, because I remember it with clarity, because it reminded me of you, Senator McKenna. I knew the amount of work you had done on this. So this was on the Senate floor during one of the probably last week of session, and it was really late. Okay, I don't know, it was like probably midnight. And Senator Block and I came together. Yes, we came together as strong allies to discuss the bill, and then went over. Representative McQueen came over, and they were presenting it on the floor. So we had this really constructive, bipartisan, collaborative conversation about the importance, about the protection of community, about the protection of the horses. It was a very common sense, cohesive bill, and I am by no means a horse expert, but in reading the analysis and reading everything and talking to him, and we went back and forth because Senator Ezell, a horse expert herself. I mean, this woman really understands a whole lot behind this. She had a lot of questions, and I'm telling you, it was midnight. So folks are trying to, keep up the energy. And I went and spoke to Senator Zell, and she had her concerns. But by the end of the night, we were all in consensus, of the support, which I was very proud of. All of us were very proud of. So we actually expected it to be signed, and I do not know the answer, but I am hopeful that, that we can really get that done, because it's critically important. And I think folks who witness those situations, it's very clear it's needed. And folks in Placitas remind us quite frequently of the desperate need. So thank you for your work on it, Senator McKenna.
Okay. Hey, my name is Al Knight, and I believe the average age in Corrales right now is about somewhere between 57 and 60 years old. About 3.5 years ago, I had a back problem that got diagnosed as spinal stenosis. A week from Monday, I get to see a surgeon. That is 3.5 years of dealing with the healthcare system in New Mexico. So the problem is doctors and surgeons and malpractice insurance. So my question to you two is, what did you do or not do in the last legislative period to help solve this problem? And what will you do in the future to help solve the malpractice insurance problem in New Mexico?
Thank you very much. I sit on the Health and Human Services Committee, the standing and the interim. I'll start with your last question. What we are doing is that I just talked to the chair for the interim committee, and she's going to dedicate an entire meeting, which is like a week-long meeting, to put the stakeholders together and she was saying to work on a bill, and I said it needs to be like an omnibus. It has to be several bills, like a bunch of bills. And so that is something that's what we're going to do. Some of the things that I've done is I've carried a bill that did not progress, but I'm going to carry it again. And so there are a lot of different bills out there to help recruit and retain medical providers. The one item is a housing subsidy. What we did pass this session is increase the tax increase the tax discount for rural medical doctors, require hospitals to pay back medical providers who are paying tax. What right now, hospitals are supposed to be paying their GRT and not the medical providers, but hospitals are sending them back their money um, without clearly indicating what's a GRT and what's it. And so we required them that they have to be able, that the hospitals have to be able to roll that out and to make sure that the doctors know that they're getting paid back for the GRT on that. That did pass. And I'm so sorry, I'll think of it. But one other thing passed. The House passed 8 compact bills and the Senate had 3 compact bills. The issue, there are pros and cons with compacts and none of them passed and none of them will be signed because none of them made it to the governor's office. There are issues with the compacts themselves because you're following another state's laws. And so that was that issue. I hope that I think Senator Trujillo is going to be working on it along with Representative Thompson to see how that they can formulate those compacts in a more acceptable format. I will caution, I will let people know the issue with your medical being access to medical doctors. And my mom right now who lives with me is in Ohio because that's where the specialty doctors are needed right now. And she usually lives with me here in New Mexico. So, so I understand the access to them, but this narrative of everything's medical malpractice is incorrect, and I don't accept that. Understand that we are a state with the largest amount of private equity owned hospitals than any other state in the country. You have accountants making decisions, medical decisions for you. And they have decided to put out this narrative that doctors are against lawyers and lawyers are against doctors. Meanwhile, the insurance company's picking up the dollar and putting it in their pocket. And nobody's looking at the insurance companies. It's an insurance company issue as far as I'm concerned. So now, I do think that there's things we can do to help doctors. I'm doing a housing subsidy to try to help doctors because when they're residents, they're not making any money. How can I get them to stay here? Well, maybe if I help them buy a house here and they stay here for 10 years, then they get a section of this house paid for. You know, I want to incentivize them. Representative Anaya has come up with a program through Workforce Solutions that will reach out to people who used to live in New Mexico, who graduated from New Mexico, but are practicing in other states. How do we get them back? She hates when I call it this, but I'm going to call it a concierge service that says, like, how do I need to expedite your license to be changed to New Mexico? Oh, your son is in competitive level baseball. Do we have a baseball school we can get you lined up with? What neighborhood did you want to live in? Oh, you like to go horseback riding? Have you seen houses in Corrales? You know, this is a great horse country. So to be able to help them with all the lifestyle and administrative issues. We also, that's the other thing we did this, we are increasing the education dollar forgiveness as well. As you stay longer in the state, we will forgive more of your education dollar. So there are more issues. I think the Senator Duhigg had a whistleblower act that didn't pass that I think we need to bring back. And quite frankly, we need, despite what the hospitals are telling you, a nurse staffing ratio bill, which we keep carrying. But the Hospital Association and everybody else keeps saying, oh, no, it's medical malpractice. Understand, for every patient a nurse has above the bare minimum national standard of ratio, there is a 7% mortality rate in 30 days from that hospital. So not injury, not infection, mortality rate, a 7%. And we keep talking about medical malpractice and the doctors or the New Mexico, or keep telling you it's medical malpractice. Did any of them tell you how to increase patient safety? How do you lower medical malpractice? You address the safety concerns. I don't see one idea about that or one that is willing to be passed. And I'm willing to come out and say it now because I'm getting kind of angry with the fact that they're not willing to say, why is a doctor sued 36 times for medical malpractice before he eventually leaves an instrument inside his patient? Who is holding him accountable? And why isn't that in Think New Mexico? And so I think that that's a great article. I do. I think there's a lot of great information in it. I've read it 5 times. I keep it because it's a great reference, but it's not the only reference. And understand that if for us to be able to hold medical malpractice or look at medical malpractice, we have to look at patient safeties too. And that's what you need both. You need both to be able to help. And people in general, just workforce studies in general, they look at environment. And if you're a doctor that doesn't feel like you can be successful here because your hospital is telling you you have to see a patient every 20 minutes, or that you have to work with an unscrupulous partner that you don't like because he works fast and the hospital likes him. I mean, that we have to look at those things. Can we protect those doctors from whistleblowing? So we have to look at, it's got to be a conglomerate, a bunch of bills that will be able to address that. And I absolutely agree with you. I'm sorry that it's taking so long, as you know.
If I may add something on this, because this is critically important, and I will tell you, even when we look at healthcare by age, right? It differs, of course. But then the reality is, and I told folks in Senate Health Education and Senate Health Committee, because they do make it out that the whole rhetoric is now sort of a warfare between attorneys and medical providers. And it is not that. It is completely incorrect. The effort on the communications that they've utilized, great, but that is not the fact. Those aren't the facts. And we have to also, and I just drove it down to them by telling them and reminding them, yes, we can look at healthcare by age range and see how it affects distinctively and just differently. But then we also have life occurrences, right, that randomly happen and you just don't know. We are all prone to accidents. We're all prone to random things that could happen. So I had to embed and repeat my story of my brain surgery over and over and over because I was not expected to have a brain tumor. I was not expected to land in the hospital for 17 days. All of these things drove me to see healthcare from a very different lens. So when our people, and believe me, the legislative session was heavy on this and MedMal, and making it this issue that is divisive and that ultimately damages our communities is not something I'm fond of. And I'm completely in agreement with the representative here. This is really about investing in our communities. This is an insurance problem, and we can't be played. And we have to invest in recruiting, retaining, and growing our own. And we have a highly effective medical school in New Mexico. We have one also, in southern New Mexico. But when I talk about UNM Health and the UNM School of Medicine, I am familiar with their practices. I'm familiar with their BAMD program. I think we need to be more invested in those programs to ensure that we're recruiting, retaining, but that we're investing in New Mexico as a whole. And during session, Senator Linda Trujillo and I actually also had a bill, Senate Bill 172, which essentially was to expand workforce of medical professionals by looking at licensures. So there's a lot of medical professionals from other countries who have licensures who can't really just come and practice here all that easily. So that bill sort of got stuck, didn't move, unfortunately, but I think that would have been a support system. But I agree. I think this has to be an omnibus, really sort of plan in order to really address the amount of issues that we have. We need, I believe the last data that I saw was about, we need 200 more doctors in New Mexico since 2022. But we need student loan repayment, increasing Medicaid reimbursements. We need increased tax and rural incentives. And really, this needs to be a collaborative effort. We all need doctors. We all do. We all have family members. And God forbid that you land in a hospital bed with uncertainty of living for the next day. And I tell folks, I am an old soul. And after that brain surgery, I'm hitting 77 and I'm not here to waste time. So I just need to make sure that I remind you. So, thank you.
Excuse me, folks. Just gonna come in here and get your question. Hello, I
first want to thank you all for your work and for coming to this town hall. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Debbie Vigil. My family has been in Corrales almost 60 years. I personally have come back to Corrales to live on my dad's farm. Obviously, there are so many issues that are all extremely important. I want to ask about one in particular, not that the others are not, because they're all super important. But my concern that I want to bring to you is the relationship between oil and gas needs. We all need our lights, our fans, our air conditioners, heaters, etc., and the water, which is so valuable here in the Southwest. We've seen that the oil and gas drilling all over the place affects the groundwater, which here in Corrales, we drink the well water and we use it for our plants. And I'm wondering what the state is doing for the relationship between these two, because we need both and one affects the other. And yes, we want our electricity, et cetera. But the water and the fracking and the pollutants that come with that are very important to our health and well-being. So I'm just wondering what you're doing to the relationship with those two.
We did pass the Strategic Water Supply Act. We passed several really large water bills this session. And just for those, so we have a law already on books. It's only been on for a couple of years. So it's only really, that means they've only been doing it for 6 months. But that requires oil and gas to use, Chris, what's the name of the water? Produce water. Thank you. See, thank you. I need more coffee this afternoon before my next town hall. I got another one after this. For produced water. The larger oil and gas companies are mostly making sure they're doing it. That's using the water that comes up when they're drilling. They have to reuse that and not keep using potable water. We are coming ways of incentivizing, doing a carrot and stick approach for both those things. And so I would strongly ask you to look into those bills that were signed. And then there are other ways of incentivizing. A lot of the bad actors are actually our mom and pop businesses. They're not capping their wells correctly. They're not following it because they're on a smaller footprint. They're not being watched as well. And so we're trying to figure out ways we can support that. We've even tried to create a fund where we'll just go in and do it, but then it's been criticized as, are we subsidizing oil and gas? And so that has not been able to pass. So just know that it's something that we do talk, and I'm vice chair of the water committee, so we do talk about this all the time. Thanks.
I'm trying my best to get to everyone, so.
Talk from here. I was risk manager at the university and I was general services risk manager. So I've paid a few med-mal claims. And I lobbied for 15 years for counties. So my understanding is we've got the trial attorneys with the big lobby, got the hospitals with a big lobby. We've got the medical providers with a big lobby. And then we have some nonprofits like Think New Mexico. I assume they have a lobby. So we now don't have anybody at the table for the insurance industry. So we're going to blame them for not having enough doctors. I'm really trying to sort this out.
Why is there nobody at the table for insurance industry?
I don't.
Yeah, there is.
There are lots of lobbyists for the insurance industry.
They each got
So
one.
obviously UNM is paid by state. There's no profit motive in their insurance. There's clearly exactly what you identified, the profit motive and the pressure to hurry and all that in the private. Who can bring us together so we can get more docs and nurses and PAs, nurse practitioners?
So we just said
Yeah.
that we will have that, we'll have an interim, but just understand, there isn't, so there's a couple of issues. One is every state will tell you they have a medical provider shortage. Every single state in the country, even Texas, who's got premier medical, will tell you they're short, especially in rural areas. Two is that most, just for you guys to know, most states, I'm holding you a piece of pie here. Usually your Medicaid or Medicare patients is about 20%. If you're in Rhode Island or Connecticut, it might even be smaller than that, but approximately 20%. So you have private pay and insurance to be able to offset this amount. And that was one of the issues that was going on with New Mexico for many, many years. We have 45 to 55% Medicaid, Medicare. You can't offset your private insurance with that big of a piece of the pie on that fixed rate there. So we went to 120% Medicaid, then we went to 150% that just got implemented in July. It passed in 23, but in July 24 is when it started. And now I believe Senator Hickey is working on 180% to be able to make sure, because like a lot of our healthcare in the state are called federally qualified health clinics, and they are 100% Medicaid. Those are your clinics. So how are we making sure that that we're able to cover costs in that way? So that is really just kind of like the state of our state of why healthcare is very difficult. I don't think we have. I have had no issues at all with any of the medical providers. They've been awesome with great information and diverse across. It's the trial attorneys and the hospital association. It's those that are, and yes, every insurance company has 3 lobbyists on there.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I want to thank you both for coming to the village today. I'm Ken D. Huff. My wife and I run Bad Coyote Farm on the far north end of Corrales Road. I'm going to ask 4 minutes of your time. Sorry. There's a question here. We all received our property valuations recently. The assessor treats Corrales differently than the rest of the county. She divides the village into 3 6-mile-long north-south strips of more than 1,000 lots each, and then assigns a single community-wide estimate to all land in each strip. All of us, every lot, received a double-digit increase this year, and while the 3% increase cap slows the damage for existing homeowners, the damage is still being done, especially to non-residential lots. The worst increase was to my strip, east of Corrales Road, where every acre will be taxed at exactly $290,000. That's a 42% increase from last year. That's an extra 400 pounds of produce per acre. Other small farmers like me will need to sell this year just to keep our land. Or we'll have to dramatically increase our prices or just leave. Both the Sandoval County Valuation Protest Board and a district court judge have told our assessor plainly that these community-wide estimates are unlawful. But she hasn't stopped doing it. So I'm asking you both to fix this with the governor. I'd like to give you this. It's 3 pages of documentation that you can use. I'll go through them very quickly. page one on, you give,
I
I
am
pro-
aware of this. Sorry, sir, but I am very much aware of this. We were working on it in the legislative. I am horrified by this tax assessor. I have publicly said this at a legislative meeting, at a county assessor meeting. I think it's completely wrong. I support your position. If you think talking to the governor will help about this, I will bring it to the governor. I'm planning to see her next month. I am happy to hear, I hadn't heard about the court cases. I'm glad to see that
They're in your
somebody is
hand.
on it. So thank you.
Mhm.
I will definitely take this. I just, just know that it's not that we're asking you because we have to get to a lot of questions, not because we don't believe in what you're having to say. I say yes. Please, this is ridiculous. And it's a rogue assessor that is the issue. And we've gone to the county and understand your counselors are in this room too, and they are very much aware of it as well.
So let me ask my question.
Okay.
Can we trust you both to make sure this gets fixed and come back and give us an update on what's going to be done to uphold the rule of law in Corrales?
You can trust me that I will bring it to the attention of the governor if you think that is what will help. I have tried to fix it legislative wise, and I have also done it by talking to the county assessors as a group, as a whole, saying, hold your own accountable. She's out of control. And it's not just, I mean, this is the worst issue, but there are 7 issues about this tax assessor's office that I have problems with. And I'm a licensed realtor. So I have to deal with her on a pretty regular basis. So I'm with you on it. You can trust me with that. Can I control the outcome? No, I can't. So I don't want to tell you that you can trust me with that, but I will. I'll go to the governor if you think that'll help.
Thank you for providing this evidence. It's actually very tangible and certainly needed. And I think you can count on the collaborative effort here to ensure that the facts are straight. And of course, we can't control the outcome, but we will absolutely rally up with you. Thank you very much, sir.
I just wanted to mention it's just questions and answers here. So if you guys have a statement, you're more than welcome to speak to them afterwards, okay?
I'm sorry, can we just get an idea, Melanie? Can you ask, if anybody online would like to ask a question, can you hold up a hand just so that we make sure that we set aside enough time for our online people? And then go ahead to somebody here in the room. Thank you.
We do have one person that has their hand raised on Zoom.
I'm not on Zoom. I'm bringing up something arcane. I agree with, many of the critical issues and I take action on those. Just sitting here, it has occurred to me, and I really don't know other than a study what you could do in the legislature, but RLD has rolled out our cannabis. They've made a mess of it and they're destroying small businesses. I think they are impacting, the industry. Unfortunately, New Mexico was very late to that table and ceded to Colorado income that we coulda, woulda, shoulda. But, there are way too many licensed, I don't want to go into the details, but what could be done to straighten out RLD and how they're handling this?
I don't think RLT is what you're saying, Vicki, sorry, but that's where they house their license, right? I think you're talking about like the cannabis division that regulates them, which I think is through HCA.
I think it's RLD because they're doing licensure and they're licensing way too many. I don't know. I could be wrong, but there are issues in terms of, revenue to the state and on and on. It could be somewhere else. I haven't researched this, but go ahead and educate me.
Well, I'll go educate myself. So let me go do that. I will tell you, I go to Senator Duhigg when I have cannabis questions and Representative Romero. They're my cannabis experts. Everybody kind of has their wheelhouse in the legislature, so that's who I go to when I really want to know about something. I will say I did carry a bill which did not get through Senate Judiciary, which is a lot of them don't get through there. But that would increase penalties on water theft. And it's geared towards cannabis business because we find that there's a lot of water theft going on in that business right now. So I deal with what's water. I'll find out. I know that there is a law of like a retail cannabis business can't be licensed within so many feet of another retail cannabis business. And unless you get an exception, and I know Albuquerque got a lot of exceptions. But I'll reach into it, Vicky. I'll talk to you about it offline. I don't have any information to give you. But do you know anything about?
I do not, unfortunately, but happy to also look into it, Vicky.
I think it's really what I'm pointing to, and I can discuss, I love you both.
Okay.
And unfortunately, one of you doesn't represent me and the other does. Thank you.
Okay, give it.
This is just for Cindy Nava. So I know you were on a committee, I think it's some sort of health committee, and you voted against putting a medical bill that was either malpractice or licensure. No, what was the other one?
No, it was malpractice.
Well, anyway, one of them, and you voted to not
Mhm.
put it onto the floor. Why did you not vote for that?
Thank you for the question. And this is precisely what we were just discussing. This was specifically a bill that did not bring all of the game players to the table. You had folks who had been affected by medical malpractice and all the rhetoric on the top that put the trial lawyers, right, in this huge argumentative sort of situation against medical doctors, which is really not the issue. They're leaving insurance companies completely floating out of the conversation. And this bill did not address all of the issues. I had folks who have been victims of medical malpractice who could have never afforded to have someone defending them, and spoke to all of the counter players. And then the main organization leading the efforts is Think New Mexico, who is heavily funded by the Hospital Association. So if all of the game players are not at the table, I am not going to trust why the bill was being brought forward. And folks were not representative equally at the hearings, in the forums. And this is exactly what we were talking about, that we need to come together to have everyone at the table, because we need medical professionals. We absolutely do. And we need them now. So we need to ensure that we are incentivizing, that we're recruiting, but that we're also leveraging and looking at the facts. And the facts were not at the table. So along with all of my Senate colleagues who voted against it, except for, of course, Senator Hickey, we were all on the same page. We need to ensure that all of those voices are represented, and that we bring in various bills, an omnibus sort of lens of bills that address the severe deficit of medical professionals in New Mexico. And as someone who's encountered these issues, I am deeply passionate and committed to ensure that we do that, and that we do it fast. But that was the understanding behind it. Thank you.
My question, hi, I'm Kathleen Harvey and I live here in Corrales. My question is, you guys were talking about how busy this session was, and it was. And it's busy in the 30-day. We're rushing stuff. We're not getting all the information. I think, and I have said this for years, so it's not a new thought in my head, we need a full-time legislature. We need to pay our legislators. I mean, you guys got to have other jobs, and you have other things to do because you need to make money. You don't make money being a legislature here. And we have a very old legislation. I'm old, and I shouldn't be in the Senate or the House here in New Mexico and neither should those other people, you know? And,
Senator's doing her part.
huh? Oh, sorry, Cindy, I forgot. But we need to,
7, I'm telling you.
we need to start paying legislators, and we need to be more professional. We're the only state in this United States of America that has a volunteer. You can volunteer because you're rich. I know Kathleen Cates very personally, good friends with her mother, and I know that she's not rich. And she does a lot of work. We need to have you guys get paid for this so you don't have to say, I got to take 3 days off from work so I can go to this conference that's important about water, about the horses or whatever. I mean, we got to grow up.
Can I say something on that? Because I greatly appreciate you bringing that up. I am the youngest woman of color in the Senate, and I am one of the 2 youngest members in the whole body. So that to me weighs heavily because it says there's a reason behind it, and it clearly is that. I have to have a job. And I have to, we have to manage, both of those things. But that is one of the main things and one of the main reasons why young people aren't running and they can't afford to. So even making the decision to run was difficult because I needed to ensure that I was able to survive. And I left DC, right, because I was with the administration. But when I think and when I speak to young people, we need them here. We need them serving in office. We need them in the town halls. We need to be intentional about recruiting them. But we need to do that walking the talk, not just saying it. And to me, if they don't see a reflection of themselves, then how and why would they be encouraged? So I am deeply passionate about it. I've talked about it in caucus, and I told them, look, if it hasn't passed before, we're about to get real because I think we have enough precedents set across the nation. And we have such a valuable state that is not, we are really, really unique across the country. And I think we have enormous opportunities. But if we are limited because of time and we're pulled left and right because of all of our commitments, it makes things difficult and hard. And guess who wins? It's the private industries. It's the folks who put the lobbyists forward. They're the ones that can spend all the time doing that work, while the legislators themselves, perhaps some of them do have wealth, but some of us do not. And some of us need to ensure that. So I am deeply committed and deeply passionate about representation. And if we really want a legislative body that looks like New Mexico, we better start investing in it.
Thank you, ladies, for coming and listening to us and answering our questions. I have 2. One is kind of lightweight and having to do with the functionality of the state legislature. We have a female majority legislature. Woo-hoo. And I am wondering, this goes to you, Kathleen, since you've been in 3 sessions, do you think that with less testosterone in the room, that the legislature is functioning more efficiently or effectively?
So I know that you're asking me to go on record to be sexist, but I will say I'll embrace it. Yes, I do believe we are. I just as a side note, in 2016, not that long ago, there was no female bathroom in the House of Representatives lounge. That was not that long ago. By 2018, the House had a majority of women in it, and we've kept that majority of women in the House side since 2018. The Senate does not have a majority of women, but there has been an increased amount of women in the Senate, and there's such a super majority of women on the House side now that we have the largest female legislature in the entire country. And yay, that's from both parties, and both parties. And I see we are very task oriented people. And I'm sorry, I'm going to tell a little story here. Is I was talking to national supporters of the independent voters, the open elections, the bill I was telling you about. And they were coming here, they wanted to learn from me, like what they could bring to other legislators. They've been working on this issue for 10, sometimes 15 years in other states. And they said and I went to introduce myself and they were like, oh no, we know you. And I was like, all right, that could not always be good. But they were saying they watched all the debates, and one of the things they took away was they had never seen such a legislature that actually helps each other. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, when you're seeing your fellow legislator struggling, you get up and debate and you support him, you lift him up. And they said that does not happen in other states. And I do think that's a reflection of a mostly woman.
Good, thank you. Second question is, what is afoot between the legislature and the governor regarding juvenile crime and the special session? Has there been any communication? Do you anticipate, either one of you, being involved in crafting some legislation for a special session?
So the governor and I do not stay up late and braid each other's hair. So let's make that clear. I was in the office for a signing at the beginning of the month, and she admitted that she's talking with leadership, which is awesome, which is great. That's the way to do it. That didn't happen last year, and they are coming up with a special session. I'm assuming they are. Will I be a part of what is presented at the special session? No. Do I have a couple of bills that I think the governor is interested either in the special session or on her call list for 26? Yes, I do. But that's all I have. Do you have anything, Senator?
Well, I did chat with her, but I didn't get any, close door intel. But I know there's commitment for a special session, not sure when, and not sure where we're going to stand on all of the juvenile issues that we've been discussing. But I think there is an intentionality between the House and the Senate to ensure that we're working together, which I think is critically important. And the governor is more than willing to have the conversation, which I think is necessary, because the media can say one thing, right? But we're on the ground, we're actually having the conversation, and that looks very different sometimes. So I am hopeful that having that ability to have those discussions will play out differently from last year.
Okay, so let's do the counselor here, Counselor Woolman, and then we'll go to Zoom. And then if we have time, I'll be glad to go back to that piece of legislation that really what is the sticking point right now. They're calling it juvenile crime, but it's really another competency bill, just so you know.
Thanks very much for being here. Just a quick question. Thank you also for passing the Animal Welfare Act and the trust fund. My concern is, and I don't know what was in the final bill, but it doesn't go into effect until 2028, July 1st, 2028. Was the final bill revised to bring that date forward? Do you know? It would be $10 million for a lot of different purposes for cats and dogs around the state, but it wasn't be effective until July 1st of 2028. Do you know if that date has changed? Or is it still, and why was it 3 years from now when the money was already appropriated? Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Counselor. I'll be glad to look into that and give you a real answer. I just know that typically when they're pushed out that far, it is usually a budget revision, or they need to, like, if it's a brand new office, they may need the roll up for policies and process, like rulemaking. I don't know though for sure. So let me look into it so I can get you a real answer. Okay, thank you.
Melanie, if you could do the Zoom one. Sure. Up first, we have Dennis O'Mara. Dennis, make sure you unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you. This is Dennis O'Mara. I live in Corrales. And I was wondering if either of you, Cindy or Kathleen, could comment on the SLAP legislation. SLAP is an acronym that means Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And I was looking it up. AI just finds it so that it's understood that these are lawsuits brought against individuals primarily or small organizations that have the nerve or the temerity to criticize others, possibly big business, when the opponent disagrees with what is being said. And the granddaddy actually of all slap suits recently went down in North Dakota, where Greenpeace was sued by a Texas oil company because the Texas oil company didn't like the fact that Greenpeace protested against that pipeline that was going through the Dakotas. And they were actually awarded a judgment against Greenpeace for $650 million. The idea is maybe not to win such a suit, but to prevent the, but to cause the person being sued to have to defend it with their own finances and so forth. And it just throws a wet blanket over the whole idea of public participation. And so apparently the SLAP legislation in this session didn't make it out of committee, if I'm not mistaken. I wondered if you could talk about why that was, who voted against it, and whether or not you'll be bringing it back or someone will be bringing it back in the new session. Thank you.
I don't have that.
Thank you, Dennis. It did not come to my committee. I am aware of it as in I read it at the beginning of the session, but it never made it to any of my committees nor the senator's committee. It is a disturbing piece of legislature as far as I'm concerned. I like what the senator had to say at the beginning of the session. Like, let's stick to fact. Let's talk about fact. And I think that even if you're a small person that's been injured, you need to stick to fact. It's hard when you're talking emotionally. I always say when somebody starts talking to me and says never and always, I already know that I'm listening, only half listening to them because they're not sticking with fact. But I do think that this is a very scary slippery slope. And once again, trying to balance liability on the backs of the individuals is not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. Uh, and so I'm glad it died in committee, but I don't know that much about it, Dennis.
Are there any other Zoom participants that would like to ask a question?
And so we have 10 minutes.
One more
Can we-
question?
Right. Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gonzalez with the Corrales Growers Market, and you have mentioned that there is a lot of federal legislative that is really going away. My biggest concern is the food security programs that we have in New Mexico and how important they are. Our growers market does not participate in a lot of the federal programs. We are more focused on the farmers market nutrition programs, which are state and county programs. So it's important to me that when you talk about this, what the state is supporting to fill some of the gaps that are being taken away from us, that's one that is kind of at the top of your list. I think the farmers market nutritional programs are extremely effective because they work for seniors and young mothers and children. And those are at-risk communities. As a kind of a Sandoval County fresh food access vehicle, which is what the growers market really is, the Corrales Growers Market really is, we're interested in how you think you're going the state is going to be able to kind of fill that gap for us with these very important programs. I realize they're not federal programs, they're state and county programs. And I think they're the most important ones because they get right to the boots on the ground.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you for all the things you do in our community. I mean, that growers market is like our identity. It's so and takes real advocacy to make sure that it's there. I will say, just as part of because I'm the vice chair for agricultural water in Asakia, and so we did increase the state funding for food for that we buy from local farmers for our school systems. I think Meals on Wheels, some senior centers and things like that. So that's something that we accomplished this year in particularly. That is something that weighs heavily on us, and it's not just something that I carry. Senator Stefanix is very big on food security, and your lobbyist, Pam, from Farmington is excellent, and she is a wonderful voice up at legislature, making sure that all of our feet are held to the fire. So thank you.
We're gonna do one more question.
Thank you, Representative Cates, Nava, thank you for showing up. I'm Councilor Murray. Just to follow up on the one woman's question about your full-time legislative job. You and I have talked about it before. Good bills die in committee, and it's no reflection on you or Senator Nava, but how do we get past the whims of certain committee leaders who kill good bills? Because there are a lot of things that could be passed or sent to the floor for a direct vote without, let's say, interference by certain committee members.
The answer, do you have the answer? I do, but you go ahead. No, go right ahead. No, I will let the senior senator, the senior.
Oh, okay. I'd say vote. And tell your cousin to vote. That's in Otero County and Donna Ana County and McKinney County, and call all your cousins throughout the state. Because there are legislators in both parties who've been there for a very long time.
I'll add, I think vote is absolutely accurate. As a new senator, I will tell you, I think beyond just representation, I think voting folks who are also willing to be collaborative and strategic and willing to partner, because you can be an amazing candidate, but it doesn't mean that you are going to be an incredible collaborator. And right now, more than ever, we need collaborators. We don't need more division. We have that. We have plentiful of that. And we need to be setting the example. And I will tell you, because I took that to heart, because it's easy to judge people. It's easy for folks to make assumptions about who we are, right? And coming into this seat, coming in, and I told you, I mean, it's in my background, who I am, and being one of the two youngest members, there's a lot of assumptions that came with that. A lot of things that folks thought they knew about me. Well, everything was incorrect, okay? And I decided to ensure that I proved that by my first session. My collaborative, bipartisan approach was evident. I got it through. Folks were shocked. I am the most unlike person to be presenting a piece of legislation on law enforcement, okay? And that was clear to me. Folks could not put it together. But this is why we educate people. This is why we need to ensure that we are collaborating. And if we have leaders who block things, which we know they do, we need to hold folks accountable. And sure, voting is that one way to do it. And that's how we have to do it. But if folks are already sitting in there, are not going anywhere, then we have to collaborate with the folks who are already in the bucket and ensure that they are being collaborative to hold those folks accountable. Times are not the same. And I tell folks, if we really want to invest in the future, we better start getting them at the table. But we do that by ensuring that we have those conversations, that we do it with respect, and that we acknowledge the wisdom and experience at the table. And I say that to elders and to young people, because we need both. And I think ensuring that we hold folks accountable, that's how we make things change. And just like we talked about these unpaid legislator situation, I think that's exactly what needs to happen in order to pass that piece of legislation, bicameral, bipartisan, and really strategic in order to get it done. Because we need more time to be invested in all of these pieces of legislation and the million meetings that happen across the state. And we need to be realistic about who can do it and who cannot do it. That's my take.
All right, folks, we just want to thank everyone for coming. Please take some water or sparkling water, and it is full on snowing out there, so everybody be careful, okay?
And if you have if you have a friend who didn't make today, I have a Zoom town hall from 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Today, and it's on there. It's up. Yeah, it'll be mostly about Sandoval County.